News Talk 1340 KROC-AM. Good morning. I'm Andy Brownell with Tom Ostrom. I've been looking forward to this show all week, Tom. Good morning.
Oh, good, Andrew.
Good to see you again.
To you and you too.
Boy, oh boy. Haven't seen you since election night.
No.
And the world kept turning, and a ton of stuff has happened over the past week or so. So I've been very much looking forward to hearing your take on the events, and we'll open up the phone lines today as well at 282-1234, but we always try to start out with a mailbag, so here we go.
And this from Mary Jane. She and Stephen are always well-informed and interesting, and last week when I was on with Brent, she sent me this. I was ready to call in, but other callers called, and you and Brent swerved into the same conclusion and ran out of time. The message or mandate from voters: stop Obama's policies. If compromise is what voters wanted, they'd have put more Democrats in and, have them more communicative with Republicans. But she said, stop Obama's policies: immigration, homeland security, the borders, executive overreach, shredding the Constitution, the IRS, the DOJ, all kinds of scandals that'll now be looked into. And we hope now that the Speaker of the House, Boehner, and the new Majority Leader of the Senate, McConnell, who I'm glad to see. I'm glad to see Harry Reid displaced. But anyway, Mary Jane said, got to keep the goal in the forefront because Obama is not giving up his Alinsky tactics. It isn't in him. A willing media will cover for him. We got to keep Boehner and McConnell focused for positive reinforcement. So Mary Jane's analysis, we'll take that one. That's it.
Oh, that's it for the mailbag. Well, on the same topic, since we didn't get a chance to chat after the elections, we might as well do a little post-election analysis before the break. This sets up a whole bunch of different potential scenarios as you move forward towards the 2016 election. And, of course, that's what the real focus is going to be on. Although the one thing that's been kind of overlooked when I hear the discussion of this past election is the impact that this will have on the makeup of the U.S. Supreme Court. You do have a number of potential retirements from the court. Do these folks try to hang on for 2 more years and ride through another election cycle, or do they just go to heck with this and move forward with their lives and let things fall where they fall and have the president's going to, if he's going to throw a very, very liberal-leaning justice out there, he's going to have an extraordinarily difficult time getting this person nominated. So or do they, at this point go, oh, boy, we better get ourselves out of here and have a nomination take place before the possibility of a Republican White House comes along as well in 2016?
Well, he has an African-American woman named Lynch, who is AG, who is a what was she, a prosecutor or a judge in New York, and a conservative one. She was Law and Order. So he has offered her name, and she seems more reasonable than some people he had previously talked about. But a Republican Judiciary Committee under Senator Grassley, he's the head of the Judiciary Committee now, the Iowa farmer, they were going to ask her questions. Holder, we held him in contempt for his violations of law, his refusal to enforce law, his premeditated talks about the Ferguson situation when he's supposed to be investigated objectively, the IRS scandal he wouldn't look at, others he won't. Do you agree with him, or would you pursue these things? They're going to ask her things like that. And she also was on the Clinton team during the Watergate scandals, Whitewater scandals, and helped them there. So that's what they're going to do, is grill anyone he sends forward and delay, I think. But she seems reasonable from the list he could have picked. But they'll have to ask her, are you prepared to counterpoint the Secretary Holder now that he's going to be gone. But, yeah, you're right. And the Republicans have all these committees on global warming and everything else that they're the heads of now. And so it's going to be a change. That's the impact.
Oh, it's going to be very interesting. But as our mailbag item pointed out, there's an expectation among at least some factions of the Republican Party that you're going to go in there with your new majorities and you're going to knock some heads. And I would question whether that might be the wisest strategy looking forward to 2 years ahead, because what I see from this election was the Democrats made themselves remarkably unpopular. It wasn't anything that the Republicans did to become popular. So whether you can, I guess we're kind of in agreement with Mary Jane, but the Republicans need to come up with an agenda then to move forward, rather than these guys kind of are just garbage. You know what I'm saying is to be on the critical. If you're going to take the White House in 2016, you better have an agenda. That's what I'm trying to
but they had one, and they sent hundreds of pieces of legislation to Harry Reid in the Senate, and he didn't even bring it to the floor for a vote. But you're right, they're going to have to come up with proposals, and they're going to have to put them on his desk. Then they're going to have to explain to the public, these are the proposals we have, here's what it does for everybody, and he's vetoing them. You're right, they're going to have proposals and then make him accountable for vetoing them. But they're even thinking now, the Democrats, of doing the Keystone Pipeline to keep Mary Landrieu in office in Louisiana. They're so political, and we're going to get into it later, so disingenuous with things. But I think the Republicans got credit for saying no. They were right about a lot of things they know about, including Obamacare.
But the danger of that, and I'm just pointing out, I agree with you, they got elected by saying no, and the public agreed with their criticism of these policies. But if you continue to go forward, let's put it this way: the president could completely undermine the strategy by putting forward compromises. He does not appear to be even interested in doing that at this point. I agree with it. But if he were to do that, and then the Republicans were to balk at any negotiations with him, I'm talking about meaningful negotiations, not fairy tale where we're going to get together and say things but not really mean it. That could put the Republicans in an awkward position going towards the presidential election.
It should, but I can't see him compromising. If he did, I hope the Republicans are smart enough to say, now, we've sent him this, and he's willing to do this, which we have asked him to do for years, so this is fine, and show the public. But they've got to communicate much better than we do to avoid the problems that you're suggesting. And that I worry about.
And I think you have reason to worry. It's 17. It's only 17 degrees in downtown Rochester, Tom, and I am sad to report that the root beer stand along 4th Street Southeast is closed for Roscoe's Root Beer and Ribs. It was inevitable. It just came a little sooner than I had hoped. But not to worry. The North location is open, and you can get all of your wonderful barbecued treats there all year round at Shopko. Right up by Shopko North, the Roscoe's North location. And
this is the party season. So go to Roscoe's and get gift cards, get gift certificates available in any amount. Ask for what you want, they'll do it. And, that Chicago-style hot dog that I love so much, boy, you can get that at Roscoe's North. And they've got the side dishes you and I talk about, Andy, baked beans, black-eyed peas and coleslaw, broccoli, green beans, all kinds of potatoes, JoJo potatoes, French fries, potato salad, cornbread. You always like the cornbread.
I do.
Some pasta dishes. And as you said, the best barbecue in town, great place for lunch or dinner.
And don't forget, as you mentioned, the gift cards as we head towards the holidays. That's Roscoe's Root Beer and Ribs. The North location is open all year round. 24 minutes past 10 o'clock. I'm Andy Brownell with Tom Ostrom. 282-1234 is our number, and we'll do a news break at the bottom of the hour. A reminder to be sure to like us on Facebook. Get out there and put that little like on there, or go to the Facebook, our KROC-AM page, that is, and go under the Win Stuff column, and you get signed up for our newsletter, and like us on Facebook, and you can be eligible to win some pretty darn nice prizes. Tom, what do you want to get going with here?
Eric Holder, who will be leaving the Justice Department, thankfully, and some of the scandals that he blocked will be looked at by the new Republican-led committees in the House and the Senate. But the Minneapolis schools are marching to his drum and to the drum of the U.S. Department of Education, and Minneapolis suspension policies are under increased scrutiny. The civil rights people in the federal government are asking for this. Too many African-American students and students of other colors are being expelled. Well, that's bad. Let's not talk about behavior or the cultural reasons why. Even in Wisconsin, the liberal school systems in Madison have a list. You can't expel a minority student for doing this or for doing that or for doing this or spitting at the teacher or even striking the teacher unless, see, they're just political correctness and craziness. So students of color, they want to reduce their suspension rates by 50%. If they're white, no questions asked if they're expelled. If they're minority, people of color, then there's a big format and a lot of the team of the superintendent will look at the teacher or look at the principal, and they say, we're doing this because it's a moral and ethical imperative. Well, so is proper behavior a moral and ethical imperative. But to say, because we can't achieve our goal of closing the achievement gap until this problem is addressed. Well, I don't know how that'll make learning any better in the classroom. I don't know how that'll make people behave themselves more, and it's just more political correctness. Well, and just like I heard in a town somewhere, Muslims were fussing about the religious holidays, so the school board took away the religious holiday names, but not the religious holidays. Andy, political correctness is going to kill us at home and even in our foreign policy.
The interesting part about the suspension expulsion issue you're talking about is that they want to have the kids in the classroom because they're saying that they're not in the classroom. There's no way they can catch up educationally if they're in the classroom. So if we keep suspending them and expelling them, they're going to be out on the streets, and they basically have no chance in our society. You put them in the classroom, and they're disruptive in the classroom, then not only are, if it gets out of control, then not only will they also not receive the education they need, the other students in that classroom will be cheated out of the education.
That's right, distraction.
So I understand what they're trying to do, and I think as often is the case, it's a noble cause. You have these kids who have not had a proper upbringing, as you would say, for whatever reason. I don't care what the reason is. And they have an inability to behave within societal norms while they're in a classroom. So in order to solve the problem, we're going to suspend the societal norms, basically, to keep them in the classroom, which is going to create a whole host of new problems. I think there's got to be a better solution.
Including their behavior problems. If they know this is the rule, these perpetrators, they'll even get worse. And it's a threat to teachers. Teachers feel threatened in these classrooms. And what's done about them?
Why don't we figure
But we have to address the problem. And it is their families. It is the welfare system. It is their culture. But they don't dare talk about it because they'll be called racist. So it's just pie-in-the-sky stuff that won't solve anything.
Well, okay, but what about within the school system itself? They have no control over what's happening on the streets. You know that. You're an educator. You have this space, and you have to deal with this space and this group of kids. Why cannot the educational system come up with some novel approach to say, these are the rules, you need to obey these rules, or you're going to be put over here, but not kick them out onto the curb? You know what I'm trying to say? Yeah, put them into another, perhaps even stricter program. That has even more demands upon them.
And then they'll say that's discrimination.
Well, but at least it has a chance of success.
I don't know. Nothing does with progressives running the education system. They're afraid to death of minorities. They're afraid to death of being called racist. And they're driving people out. If these inner city schools, I don't know how any white students care to stay in them anymore, and it's boosting homeschooling, Andy, and it's boosting the flight of students to rural schools and the flight of students to private schools. They just will not. Liberals do not face the truth, and they just haven't got the guts to do what's necessary. And if they did, they'd be in court.
The irony of this is that you hear the calls of. I wish I could remember which activist this was comparing. The state of affairs in our society today, as far as race is concerned, to the mid-1950s. And I'm like, what? Okay, that's a bit of hyperbole in the first place. But the reason you're seeing increased segregation in the schools is what you pointed out to, is white flight.
Yeah.
And you have a difficulty getting the high performing educator into those schools because of the very issues we talked about. They're fearful for their safety, and they're very frustrated by their ability to work within their profession under those conditions. So they're not willing to go teach in these inner city schools. So the cycle continues, and it's often the chicken come first or the egg.
That's
because you're going to have to put some sort of behavioral standards in place within these schools to get things kick-started, and then perhaps things could improve in the neighborhoods. But
as soon as you have standards, there's going to be called discrimination like this. And by the way, these black parents, the good families, they want good education for their children too. And like in Milwaukee and Washington, they want school choice. They want the opportunity for their children to get out of these bad schools, get to good schools, the good parents that are effectively raising their children. And these Catholic schools in these inner cities, the African-American parents who care and who can do something about it, they send their children there, and those children do well. They learn chess, they learn moral ethics, they learn subject matter. You said it's a matter of standards, but I'm saying craft any list, and then how do you impose it, and how do you enforce it?
But I think the danger in throwing up your hands and saying this is the way it is, political correctness, is then nothing ever does get done, and the kids go into the gutter, and we have this continued cycle of poverty, and then another generation of unruly kids who can't sit in a classroom, who will be expelled, and the inner city will get worse and worse and worse and worse. And I do blame. I agree with you that the liberal solution to this is not the solution to this, and they need to look themselves in a mirror and understand that in a lot of ways their ideas are making this worse. But for all of us to just go, the argument will continue. I mean, we can't talk about it because we'll be labeled racist. I disagree with that too, because we can't throw away these kids. At some point, we're going to need this generation of children or the next generation to be productive citizens.
Well, school choice, I think, in charter schools are the answer.
Well, within the inner cities, especially, maybe the voucher thing has to happen.
Yeah.
Because maybe at this point, these public school systems will have some competition and will have to implement some sort of standards.
And minority parents want that. Those that want their children to be saved and educated want that, and they're ignored.
We have to take a break for news. We're already late for news. Kim David's probably getting very impatient.
Oh, he's patient. He's a patient man. He's out there eating grapes and health food.
Well, we'll take calls after the news break. Tom Ostrom's here. I'm Andy Brownell. It's KROC-AM, 17 degrees downtown. Newstalk 1340, KROC-AM. Good morning. I'm Andy Brownell with Tom Ostrom on a Friday, a sunny, cold Friday on Rochester Today. 282-1234 is the number. Remember to check us out at KROC-AM.com. Have a replay, a podcast of the show later on today. If you missed a portion of it, you'd like to review it, or you'd like to share it with a friend, whatever you want to do. We also have videos on the YouTube channel, including Terry Atkins, the city attorney, was in this week with Tracy McCray and myself. And really interesting, he described an evening where he went out. It was actually in the middle of the night. He went out with two police officers and walked the downtown bar scene beat and got a first-hand look at the atmosphere down there, and it was interesting to hear. Check it out. It's on our KROC-AM page. Look for Terry's face and watch. It's about a 5-minute interview that he described how the nightlife is. I'm talking about like 1 a.m. on a Saturday night here in downtown Rochester. Kind of interesting. 282-1234. Tom, we've had this caller on hold all the way through the news break, so we don't want to delay anymore. Good morning. Thanks for calling in.
Good morning. How are you today?
Great, thanks.
Good to talk to you. Say, when you were talking about the inner city phenomenon of white flight, people leaving the area because they wanted their children to have better opportunities going to school, you don't have to go to large cities to see that phenomenon happening. Over the last few years, I've been seeing the same thing happening here in Rochester. People are, in some cases, even moving to small towns around the area so they can get their children into the schools that they perceive are doing a better job of educating their children. Towns like Byron or Eoto or perhaps Stewartville. And in their minds, they're just not feeling that the Rochester School District is what it used to be when my children were going to school there. And I think it's unfortunate, but I think it's an issue that really needs to be seriously addressed to figure out what's behind this, what's causing it, and what's changed in our school district to bring about this perception. And I don't see that happening, at least not on the public level.
I do like your choice of words, perception and in their minds, because I do think a lot of it is just perception at this point.
Yes.
But yeah, I agree it has happened, and I think the school district has seen it happen. And perhaps over the last couple years, some of those kids have returned, but I think there's still a sizable number of people who live on, especially on the edges of Rochester, who are sending their kids off to school systems outside of the city and I think that is part of the reason. And
perception, going along with what you both are saying, perception is reality, and the problems are that, again, it's political correctness. I saw during the debates for school board candidacy, the educators were more pie in the sky about objectives and everybody can learn and things are fine, and if there's any problem, it's white racism. And Terry Tronson, the pragmatic businessman who unfortunately lost the election, said, actually, when I'm in the schools and I talk to students, they get along pretty well.
Yeah.
It's adults that are putting this template over them and making them so race conscious and so super sensitive and so guilt-ridden, looking for trouble, that they in fact are the cause of it, not the children who get along fine. And you've told me that, Andy, that as far as the influx of minorities in the community, that the children learn from each other and get along well. Adults sometime with their ideas gum things up.
I think you hit on something there, Tom.
That was Terry Tronson.
Okay. Give Terry a little bit of credit.
Plus, he had the courage to say it during the debate.
But I don't want to minimize this either, though, because I think there is racism, and I think racism is insidious, and I think it still is a problem.
I think these things cause racism.
I'm not going to argue with that. I think sometimes the way we discuss race in our society makes it even worse.
Sir, do you have another comment? You got us going here.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I have friends and a couple of relatives who work in the Rochester School District, and they're telling me that it's more difficult for them to do their job than it used to be. They feel as if a lot of the tools that they have had to deal with difficult students are being taken away from them. A couple of years ago, we had a dear friend of my in-laws visit us who'd lived overseas for 40 years. And it was really interesting to get his perspective on our culture, having come back after 40 years being away. And what he said to us that he noticed the huge change, I think was quite perceptive. He said, in my opinion, one of the real problems with your culture now is Americans have become weak. You're afraid. And I think that there's some truth in that. When there are difficult issues that are controversial, our first reaction seems to be to back away from it, to not deal with it head on because we're afraid we might offend someone's sensibilities. Now, I'm not going to deny that, of course, there is racism, and there are people who are treated poorly, and there are people who are treated unfairly, and there's bullying, and there are all these terrible things. But it seems that we don't have the will or something to face these things head on, deal with it with some strength in a fair manner, and move ahead.
I agree.
Yeah.
Well said.
Yeah. And, there are a lot of conservative minorities, people of color, African Americans, who say the things we're saying. They are, I will say, conservative. And they have the solutions from their own experience and their philosophies. They are absolutely demonized by the race card community and by the civil rights community and the black caucuses, like this Scott that was just elected in South Carolina, just demonized. So even the members of the minority community say, we know and we have solutions. They aren't listened to. They're ostracized.
Yeah, Bill Cosby gets lit up on a regular basis when he tries to bring some common sense to some of the issues that his minority. People don't want to hear it.
Yeah. It comes right down to, and we talked about this during the news break off the air, and this transcends the race issue. It's an overall problem in our society, the lack of accountability from top to bottom. Mm-hmm. You can't call somebody out anymore for their misbehavior or missteps or wrongness. You can't say, what you just did was wrong individually. If you're going to do it, you're going to have to send out the blanket memo to everybody even those who are not guilty of these misdeeds, because you're afraid to confront the person who should be held accountable for what they did.
Yeah.
And this transcends what we're talking about in the schools. It goes into corporate America. It goes into our government. It's everywhere we look.
The school issue is just a symptom of a larger issue that's going on.
Hey, thanks a lot for your call.
Thank you.
Before you leave, before the program's over today, if possible, can you fit in an answer to a question I have, and that has to do with what are the real limits of executive power in the president? I'm completely baffled by this.
It is. Oh, we could talk about that, but yeah, we probably have to take a break before we do it, because that might get into a long discussion. Thanks for the call.
Bye.
We're going to have another caller who's been on hold before we take the break, and we'll try to dive into that, because that might be the central issue of the last 2 years of this presidency. Good morning. You're on KROC.
Yeah, good morning, and I'd love to hear your answer to the question posed by the last gentleman. I apologize, I didn't get to hear the first half of your presentation, your program today. Did you cover the policy change up in the Twin Cities or in the Minneapolis School
District? Yes, that's what was the catalyst for this.
And it just, it seems to me that that really is going to inflame the problem, because anytime you start to treat two different groups differently, and even if you claim you're trying to do it to make sure that everything is fair, it very quickly evolves from your target goal to they're getting special treatment. They get a review, and we get sent home the first, whatever. It just doesn't seem like there's a lot of common sense going on here.
Very well said.
Yes.
Anyway, I'll let you get on to your comment, because I really love to hear how the president can be limited to his constitutional powers.
The great constitutional scholars in this studio will try to tackle that after the break.
Obama's there? All right, thanks, guys.
18 degrees downtown. It's 13 away from 11 o'clock. Victoria's Restaurante and Wine Bar. They're in downtown Rochester. Go there for dinner, go there for lunch, enjoy it. It's a wonderful meal and the ambience, but also remember, as you plan your holiday party or your office get-together, your birthdays, your weddings, whatever it may be, that they can take care of you wonderfully with their catering business at Victoria's.
And they've got a lot of great catering experts, Barb and Jason, and that's a specialty, and they're busy all the time with parties, families, graduations, weddings, holidays, and people sometimes bring their groups to Victoria's because they have so much room in a special room, or Victoria's will bring all of this wonderful food to your house with the pasta bars and the entrees and the expertise and the servers, and take care of all of your party needs at such a high level of wonderful foods and pastas and chickens and beef and salads, wine bar, the desserts. You'll have the best party you could imagine.
And all you have to do is call them today at 280-6232 and book your next catering event with Victoria's Restaurante and Wine Bar, downtown Rochester. It's already 7 minutes away from 11 o'clock. I'm Andy Brownell with Tom Ostrom. On Rochester Today, before we went into the break, a caller asked a big, giant question of us to try to explain the limits of executive power on the federal government level, and that goes back to your basic civics lessons and the checks and balances between the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. And I guess from my point of view, the simple answer, the limit of executive power has been thrown out of whack because of what has been happening at the legislative branch for the last at least 4 years. Harry Reid and the Democratic majority in the U.S. Senate have effectively granted the president dang near unlimited executive authority at this point.
Yes.
And the only check that could have been put in place, the court part is happening. That check is occurring, but that's a very long and drawn-out process that takes a long time. And now the Supreme Court is hearing the subsidy part of Obamacare, whether the language of the Affordable Care Act even allowed for the setup of healthcare.gov and the distribution of subsidies through that. And that is an executive authority question. But if you're going to rely on the courts to do that, It gives the president, as in this case, years to implement policies before the courts actually deal with it on an effective basis. The legislative check is a far quicker and more effective check, but over the last 4 years it hasn't been used at all because it's been impossible for the opposition party to implement any sort of check at that level because of the obstruction of the democratically controlled Senate.
Yeah, correct. And what it'll change now with the Republicans in charge of both houses. The way you check executive power is get a person of the other party into the presidency, and he can cancel those executive orders or countermand them. Congress can pass laws to check and challenge it too, but as you say, they couldn't before, they could now. And it's a matter of whether the courts, how far into politics they want to get, and who the judges are, left or right. They can chastise the president, and it takes delay, but they can. So the Republicans are going to have to get more conservative judges on appeals courts and in that Washington D.C. area, and on the Supreme Court. But there can be checks, but the politics of it, courts are reluctant to get into too much politics, and the politics of judges and the Congress prevents it. But it can change with another president, and executive orders can be simply changed by the new president, and court challenges, depending on the court and the stated case, can remedy these things. But they take time.
Right. The part of this is a lot of folks have this perception that there's clearly marked lines, that this is the courts area, this is the executive branch area, this is the legislative branch area, because this is what the Constitution says. That these are the responsibility of the legislative branch, these are the responsibilities of the executive branch, and it's not that clear cut. It is a constantly moving line, and through the history of this country, each one of those three legs of the chair have constantly tested the other side and pushed for additional power, and that had to be checked. And sometimes it takes decades for it to be brought back to balance.
That's right, and it can be quicker too, though, in the sense that now the border enforcement people are demoralized by what they say is Obama's erosion of federal immigration law. And the Republicans can simply defund an executive order. That they could do very quickly. Say, this is what you want to do, Mr. President? We're not giving you the money to do it. That could be quick.
And on the immigration issue, especially if what we're hearing the reports of the executive action the president may take regarding illegal or undocumented people living in the United States, that could be enough to trigger a court response that could put an immediate halt.
Yes.
Do I think that's likely? No, but it's possible.
Yeah.
Okay. We got to talk. We have a couple minutes left. We got to talk about this YouTube sensation, the viral video. What's his name? Gruber?
Well, Jonathan Gruber, who's a Massachusetts Institute of Technology economist, and he shows and typifies the contempt liberals have for conservatives and for the masses that they say they're in favor of. And he's been put on film saying, yes, Obamacare, we got through because we didn't have transparency. It got through because we lied about the taxation element. It got through because we wrote it in such a way that the Office of Management and Budget couldn't score it negatively. And we got it through because that's what the public should have, and they don't know it, and they're too stupid to understand what we're doing.
He used the term stupid, too.
Yeah, he used the term stupid. And Nancy Pelosi, the former House Speaker, came out and said, we don't know who Gruber is. The White House says, we have no idea who he is. He didn't write anything. He didn't craft anything. And so then YouTube came out showing Nancy Pelosi in 2009 thanking Dr. Gruber for his brilliance in helping us craft these things. But then it was Nancy who said, we won't know what's in it till it's passed. It's chaos, but it shows the contempt the administration has for the masses and their willingness to lie.
This guy said it out loud.
Yeah.
Because what Pelosi did by denying her associations with this man, you know how effective that was? It was probably largely effective because of what this man said, the stupidity of the American voter.
Yeah.
You have a sizable group of people who are willing to accept the statement. I don't care which side they're on. I don't care if they're Republican or Democrat, are willing because of their own political ideology to accept at face value complete bald-faced lies by people who are elected to political positions in this country because it's easier to just accept that and go along with it than to question their own values.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a two-way street.
It's the end justifies the means, which is a totalitarian philosophy. Although I accept it sometime when our side doesn't.
It's just truly frightening when they're confronted. Well, the saddest part about this is because it is a notable event in this presidency that this man who worked behind the scenes to craft, which is going to be written down in the history book as the largest accomplishment of this administration. It has changed the landscape of our country as far as the way we deal with, which is 15 to 20% of our gross domestic product. It's a huge issue. It's a huge issue for everyone, and it has largely been not covered by the major networks.
That's right, and it's the arrogance of the professoriate as well as the liberal elites in government.
Interesting. It's going to be an interesting thing to be studied someday. How this has all gone down. And Tom, we're already out of time. This is crazy. On Monday, the Legal Eagle will be in. David Schulman. It's been a while since we've talked to David, and I'm looking forward to that. We'll see you again on Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
Correct? You're nodding your head. You're on the radio. You can't do that.
Well, I don't want to be the center of attention.
Right. Okay. It's 11 o'clock. KROC-AM Rochester.